Let's thank the real family who'll be helping raise this baby." The words hit the fellowship hall so hard you could hear the ice shifting inside people's plastic cups. Nobody laughed. Nobody clapped. Even the women from Patricia's church circle, the ones who usually smiled through everything, froze with those tight little southern expressions people wear when they know something improper just happened in public. My daughter Emily lowered her eyes so fast it looked practiced. That was the part that broke me. Not Patricia standing there in her cream-colored pantsuit with a microphone in one hand and a mimosa in the other. Not the smug little smile pulling at the corners of her mouth. Not even the insult itself. It was the way Emily looked down automatically, like humiliation had already become a routine in her marriage. And beside her, my son-in-law Daniel sat completely still. He didn't touch her hand. Didn't clear his throat. Didn't say mom enough. Nothing. I remember gripping my purse so tightly my wedding ring pressed into my finger. For one hot second I honestly thought I might walk across that room and say something I'd regret for the rest of my life. Instead I stood up quietly. Because that's what women my age do when we're truly hurt. We leave before we fall apart in public. I had just taken one step toward the exit when Daniel's phone lit up on the table beside him. I wouldn't have noticed it if Patricia hadn't suddenly stopped breathing mid-sentence. Her entire face changed. Not dramatic. Not movie-style panic. Just color draining slowly from a woman who realized something private might no longer be private. Daniel grabbed the phone too late. But by then I'd already seen enough to know whatever message had come through wasn't meant for public eyes. Patricia sat down immediately after that. No explanation, no little joke to smooth things over. The room stayed awkwardly silent while someone near the dessert table tried to restart conversation about football. That's America for you. People will witness emotional violence in broad daylight, then ask if anybody wants more potato salad. Emily still hadn't looked up. I walked back toward her slowly and touched her shoulder. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked quietly. She nodded too fast. That meant no. Her eyes were glossy mascara starting to gather underneath them. "I'm just tired," she whispered. Pregnant women say that a lot when they don't feel safe enough to tell the truth. I looked at Daniel then. 34 years old, financial advisor, nice suits, good manners, the kind of man who opened doors and sent thank you cards and somehow still found ways to fail women when it mattered most. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That told me more than the speech did. The baby shower had started out beautiful too. That's the cruel thing about family humiliation. It usually arrives right in the middle of ordinary happiness. The church fellowship hall smelled like vanilla candles and baked ham. Pink paper lanterns hung from the ceiling beams. Emily's friends had arranged little mason jars with baby's breath flowers on each table. I'd spent 3 straight nights sewing part of the decorations by hand because Emily once mentioned on the phone that Pinterest-style showers were expensive. I never told her I stayed up until 2 in the morning doing it. Mothers don't usually keep score. At least good ones try not to. Earlier that afternoon, before guests arrived, Emily had stood beside me in the kitchen while we arranged cupcakes onto trays. "You didn't have to make all this food yourself," she'd said softly. I know I told her. "But your grandmother made everything homemade for mine, so now it's your turn to suffer through tradition." That made her laugh. A real laugh. Not the careful little ones she'd developed around Daniel's family. For a moment she looked like my daughter again. Then Patricia arrived. Everything changed after that. Patricia Beaumont had the kind of beauty older, wealthy Southern women often hold on to like a weapon. Perfect blonde hair, expensive perfume, white teeth too, even to be natural. She hugged people without warmth. Complimented things in ways that sounded like criticism. "Oh, Linda," she'd said when she saw the buffet table, "you really went all out." The way she stressed, really. Like she was surprised someone like me could accomplish basic competence. I'd spent 3 years pretending not to notice little things like that. Because Emily loved Daniel. And after losing her father at 24, she wanted stability so badly she could taste it. I understood that. Lord knows I did. After my husband Frank died from a stroke, life became one long series of practical decisions. Selling the truck, canceling cable, picking up extra pharmacy shifts at 58 because grief doesn't pay electric bills. Emily saw all of it. She saw me crying over insurance paperwork at the kitchen table. She saw me microwaving the same soup 3 nights in a row. She saw how lonely a house becomes after 40 years of marriage suddenly ends. So when Daniel came along with his polished manners and steady income and nice suburban family, part of her relaxed in a way I hadn't seen since her father died. I never blamed her for wanting safety. I only wish safety hadn't come wrapped in silence. Back in the fellowship hall, guests slowly started gathering purses and Tupperware containers while pretending the speech had never happened. That's another thing people my age do. We survive uncomfortable moments by quietly stepping around them. Patricia was near the gift table now, laughing too loudly at something one of her friends said. But every few seconds her eyes flicked nervously toward Daniel. And Daniel kept checking his phone. Emily noticed too. I saw it in the way her shoulders tightened. "What was that about?" she asked him carefully. "Nothing," he said too quickly. Married people know when nothing means danger. Especially pregnant women. Especially daughters who already feel alone. I walked toward the coat rack near the entrance and slipped on my cardigan. Outside, rain tapped softly against the church windows. Late October rain. Cold enough to ache in your joints. Emily followed me into the hallway a minute later. "Mom," she said quietly. I turned around. The look on her face scared me more than Patricia's speech did. Because humiliation fades. Fear doesn't. And for the first time since my daughter got married, I had the terrible feeling something was happening underneath this family that I did not yet understand. Something bigger than one cruel woman with a microphone. Something my daughter had been carrying alone. That night after the baby shower, I sat alone in my kitchen eating a slice of grocery store cake straight from the container with a plastic fork. That's how women my age cope sometimes. Not with wine. Not with dramatic speeches. Just yellow cake at 11:30 at night while staring at unpaid bills and wondering where exactly life bent in the wrong direction. Rain tapped softly against the window above the sink. The old refrigerator hummed in the corner. Frank's chair still sat near the television untouched, except for the Afghan folded across the back. People always tell widows eventually the house stops feeling empty. I don't think that's true. I think you just learn how to walk around the emptiness without bumping into it every 5 minutes. I kept replaying the baby shower in my mind. Emily looking down. Daniel saying nothing. Patricia smiling into that microphone like humiliation was part of the decorations. Then the phone lighting up, and Patricia losing color. That part bothered me most. Because women like Patricia don't scare easily. I was rinsing my fork in the sink when headlights swept across my driveway. A moment later, someone knocked softly at the front door. Not a confident knock. A tired one. I already knew it was Emily. She stood on the porch wrapped in Daniel's oversized gray hoodie, both hands tucked into the sleeves. 8 months pregnant and exhausted enough to look translucent under the porch light. "You shouldn't be driving this late," I said immediately. "I know. Did you come alone?" She hesitated. That answered the question. I stepped aside and let her in. The house still smelled faintly like cinnamon from the muffins I'd baked that morning for the shower. Emily walked straight to the kitchen table and sat down slowly, one hand pressed against her lower back. "You hungry?" I asked. She shook her head. That scared me too. Pregnant women are always hungry. I put water on for tea anyway. Some instincts never leave you once you become a mother. For a while, neither of us spoke. The clock above the stove ticked loudly. Finally, Emily whispered, "I'm sorry." I turned around too fast. "No," I said immediately. "You do not apologize for that woman. She's still Daniel's mother. And you're still my daughter." Emily looked down at the table. There it was again. That shrinking. That carefulness. I sat across from her slowly. "When did you start feeling uncomfortable around them?" I asked quietly. Emily gave a small laugh that sounded more tired than amused. "Honestly? Yes. Probably during the wedding." I leaned back slightly. That surprised me less than it should have. Patricia had managed the wedding the same way certain women run charity committees or homeowner associations, with smiling control and quiet intimidation. Back then, I told myself I was imagining things. Older women do that sometimes. We talk ourselves out of our instincts because we don't want to seem bitter. Emily stared into her untouched tea. "She changed almost everything I picked," she said softly. The flowers, the venue colors, even the food. I remembered. My peach cobbler recipe had disappeared from the rehearsal dinner menu 2 weeks before the wedding. Patricia replaced it with catered creme brulee cups no one over 50 actually wanted. She told me it looked more elegant, Emily said. There was no anger in her voice. That was the worst part. Only exhaustion. I studied my daughter carefully then. There were faint shadows under her eyes. Her wedding ring hung looser now from pregnancy swelling changing throughout the day. Even her posture looked apologetic somehow. When's the last time you slept properly? I asked. Emily smiled weakly. Probably February. Outside, thunder rolled softly in the distance. I folded my hands together on the table. Sweetheart, I said carefully, what exactly is going on? Emily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for a paper napkin and started twisting it between her fingers the same way she used to before high school choir concerts. Finally, she whispered, Patricia thinks I'm not ready to be a mother. I felt heat rise behind my ribs. What? She says I'm emotional, that I get overwhelmed too easily. And Daniel. Emily looked away. That hurt more than hearing Patricia's name. When his mother says things, she said slowly, he just tries to calm everybody down. That was Daniel's specialty. Not protecting people. Managing discomfort. I'd noticed it for years. At Thanksgiving, Patricia once joked that Emily's nursing shifts were cute little hobbies compared to Daniel's career. Emily laughed politely. Daniel changed the subject. At Christmas, Patricia criticized the nursery colors Emily picked because they looked a little budget-conscious. Daniel offered to repaint the room himself instead of telling his mother to stop. Every insult became a logistics discussion. Every wound got covered with politeness before it could bleed openly. Emily suddenly pressed both hands against her stomach. You okay? I asked immediately. Yeah, she whispered. She's kicking. The baby? My granddaughter. For a moment, Emily smiled genuinely. Then the smile disappeared almost as fast. There's more, Mom. Something cold settled into my chest. What do you mean? Emily swallowed hard. Patricia's been talking about paperwork. What kind of paperwork? She says after the baby comes, we should prepare for emergencies, just in case I get postpartum depression or complications. I stared at her. And she already brought forms to the house twice. What forms? Emily's eyes filled instantly. Temporary medical authorization papers, guardianship stuff, insurance access. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. She wanted you to sign that I asked carefully. Emily nodded once. And Daniel. He said maybe it would help everybody feel less stressed. I actually laughed then. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes shock exits the body sounding like laughter. Oh my God, I whispered. Emily started crying quietly after that. Not dramatic sobbing. Just silent tears running down the face of a woman too tired to defend herself anymore. I moved beside her and wrapped my arms around her carefully. She leaned into me immediately, like she'd been holding herself together all day waiting for permission to collapse. I don't know what's happening to me, she whispered against my shoulder. Yes, you do. She looked up at me. You're being slowly talked out of trusting yourself. The room went completely still after I said that. Because deep down both of us knew it was true. And for the first time since the baby shower, I finally understood why Patricia panicked when that phone lit up on the table. Whatever message had come through. It had something to do with those papers. The next morning I woke up with that heavy feeling older people know too well. The kind where your body wakes before your hope does. Rain still covered the windows. Gray Carolina rain that made everything outside look washed thin and tired. I stood in my kitchen making coffee while replaying Emily's words from the night before. Temporary guardianship. Medical authorization. Postpartum complications. The language sounded harmless on paper. That was the danger of educated manipulation. Nobody says I want control over your child. They say things like, we're just preparing. This is practical. It's only precautionary. By 9:30 that morning, I was sitting in my recliner pretending to watch local news while actually staring at the same weather map for 20 minutes. Frank used to say, people tell on themselves eventually. You just have to stay still long enough. I finally understood what he meant. At a little after 10, Emily called. Her voice sounded low and strained. "Can you come over?" I didn't even ask why. When your child says those 4 words in that tone, you go. Daniel and Emily lived in one of those newer subdivisions outside Raleigh where every mailbox matched and every porch looked staged for a realtor brochure. Patricia had helped them buy the house after the wedding. Another favor with strings attached. Emily opened the door wearing leggings and one of Daniel's old college sweatshirts. Her eyes were swollen. "You okay?" I asked immediately. She nodded too fast again. Still lying for survival. I stepped inside quietly. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and baby lotion samples. Half-built nursery furniture sat in the dining room beside unopened boxes. Somebody had left a casserole dish on the counter from the shower. Probably one of Patricia's church friends. Southern women will bring baked pasta directly into emotional warfare. Daniel stood near the kitchen island with both hands braced against the counter. He looked exhausted. Good. He should have been. "Morning, Linda," he said carefully. I didn't answer right away. Not to punish him. Just because I no longer trusted my own politeness. Emily sat slowly at the table while I took the chair beside her. "What happened?" I asked. Neither of them spoke at first. Then Daniel rubbed his face hard and said, "My mom overstepped." That sentence irritated me instantly. Overstepped. Like she accidentally parked too close to a curb. "You think I said?" Emily closed her eyes briefly. "Mom?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm tired of everybody softening this." Daniel looked down. And there it was again. That silence. Always silence. Finally, Emily whispered, "Tell her." Daniel inhaled slowly. Then he reached into his pocket, unlocked his phone, and slid it across the table toward me. "I didn't know she'd done this," he said. On the screen was the message from the baby shower. Not from another woman. Not from an affair. Honestly, part of me almost wished it had been something simpler like that. The message came from someone named Karen Mitchell, Wake County Medical Center. Below it was written, "Patricia Beaumont requested confirmation regarding newborn emergency authorization status. We cannot discuss patient documentation without maternal consent." I stared at it, then read it again, slowly. "She contacted the hospital already?" I asked. Emily nodded weakly. "She's been calling them for 2 weeks. My stomach turned. How did she even get involved in this? Daniel answered quietly. "She said she was trying to help." There are moments in life when you realize a grown adult still sounds like a frightened little boy. This was one of them. I looked directly at him. "And did you stop her?" He opened his mouth. Closed it again. That was answer enough. Emily suddenly pushed back her chair and stood up too quickly. "Can we not do this?" she whispered. But the pressure inside that house had been building too long already. "No," I said softly. "We need to do this." Emily turned toward the sink arms wrapped tightly around herself. "She keeps saying I'm overwhelmed," she said, "that I'll need support after the baby comes." "You will need support," I said. "From people who love you, not people trying to replace you." Emily started crying quietly again. Daniel moved toward her immediately. But she took one step away from him. Tiny movement. Huge meaning. He stopped instantly. The room went dead silent after that. Outside, a lawn crew started blowing leaves somewhere down the block. The sound drifted through the windows in long mechanical waves. Finally, I asked the question I'd been avoiding since the shower. "Emily, are you scared of Patricia?" Emily didn't answer. She just cried harder. And honestly, that terrified me more than if she'd screamed yes. Daniel sank slowly into a chair across from us. "She thinks Mom doesn't respect boundaries," he admitted quietly. I laughed once under my breath. "That's a polite way to describe this. She means well." "There it is again," I snapped. Daniel looked stunned. "Every time your mother hurts somebody, you translate it into softer language." He looked away immediately. "Weak men hate direct truth because they survive by smoothing edges." I regretted the sentence almost instantly when I saw his face. But not enough to take it back. Emily sat down again slowly. Then, after a long silence, she whispered something that changed the entire direction of the conversation. She wanted me to quit my nursing job after maternity leave. I stared at her. "What?" "She says daycare isn't safe anymore. She said their family could help financially if I stayed home." And what did you want? Emily's lips trembled. I wanted my own paycheck. There it was. Not just control over the baby. Dependence. Patricia didn't want Emily supported. She wanted her anchored. The realization sat heavily in the room. Daniel looked genuinely sick now. Like pieces were finally connecting in his own head, too. Mom said she was trying to reduce stress, he whispered. No, I said quietly. She's trying to make sure your wife never feels strong enough to leave a situation she's unhappy in. Nobody spoke after that. Not for almost a full minute. Then Emily suddenly asked, "What if I'm overreacting?" I reached across the table and took her hand. Sweetheart, I said softly, women don't usually ask that question unless somebody's been teaching them not to trust themselves. Emily broke completely after that. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just years of swallowed discomfort finally leaving her body all at once. And while I held my pregnant daughter in that spotless suburban kitchen, I realized something painful. Patricia wasn't the only reason this happened. Silence helped build it too. Daniel's silence. Emily's silence. Mine. And now all of us were sitting inside the consequences. Emily went into labor 3 weeks early during the first real cold snap of November. I remember because the weather alert woke me at 4:15 in the morning. Heavy rain. 40-mile-per-hour winds. Possible flooding in low areas. The kind of ugly Carolina weather that makes every road shine black under headlights. My phone rang less than a minute later. Mom? Emily sounded breathless. Not panicked yet? But close. I think it's time. By the time I reached Wake County Medical Center, rainwater was running across the parking lot like little rivers. I hurried through the sliding hospital doors, holding my cardigan closed against the cold. Inside smelled like coffee, antiseptic, and exhaustion. Hospitals always smell the same after midnight. Fear and bleach. Emily had already been admitted upstairs. When I reached labor and delivery, Patricia was standing near the nurse's desk wearing a camel-colored wool coat and pearls at 6 in the morning, like she was attending brunch instead of childbirth. Her expression tightened the second she saw me. Oh, she said coolly, you made it. I ignored the comment. How's Emily? Patricia glanced toward the hallway. She's uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. Like childbirth was mild inconvenience. Can I see her? Patricia folded her arms lightly. They're limiting people in the room right now. Something in my chest hardened immediately. Did Emily say that? She needs calm, Patricia replied smoothly. Too many people upset her. I stared at her. Then at Daniel. He stood beside the vending machines looking half awake and emotionally cornered already. Daniel, I said carefully, does Emily want me here? His eyes flicked toward his mother first. That tiny movement told me everything. I just think everybody should stay relaxed, he muttered. I almost laughed from disbelief. Your wife is in labor during a storm and you're still managing your mother's feelings. A nurse walked past carrying blankets. I stepped aside automatically. Patricia lowered her voice. Linda, nobody is trying to exclude you. That sentence usually means exactly the opposite. Before I could answer, Emily cried out somewhere down the hallway. Not loud. But enough. Every mother recognizes her child's pain instantly, no matter how old they get. I moved before anybody could stop me. Patricia called after me sharply. Linda. I ignored her. A younger nurse near room 214 looked up as I approached. My daughter's in there, I said quickly. Emily Harper Beaumont. The nurse checked the chart tablet in her hand. Then her expression changed slightly. Oh, she said, she's been asking for you. Patricia appeared behind me almost immediately. There must be some confusion, she interrupted smoothly. We were trying to keep traffic limited. The nurse looked uncomfortable now. Hospital staff see family politics every single day. You can always tell when they realize they've walked into one. I'm just following the patient's request, the nurse said carefully. Patient's request. Not grandmother's. Not husband's. Patient's. Patricia stepped back slightly after that. But the damage was done. For the first time since all this began, someone in authority had quietly acknowledged Emily's own voice mattered. The nurse led me into the room. Emily looked exhausted already. Sweat dampened her hairline. Her hospital gown hung loosely from one shoulder. Monitors beeped softly beside the bed. The moment she saw me, her face crumpled. "Mom." That one word nearly destroyed me. I moved beside her immediately and took her hand. "I'm here," I whispered. She gripped my fingers so tightly it hurt. Good. Pain meant she still trusted me enough to hold on. Outside the room, I could hear Patricia's muffled voice arguing quietly with someone. Emily closed her eyes. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Yes, you can." "She keeps talking about paperwork." There it was again. Even here. Even now. I brushed damp hair away from Emily's forehead carefully. "Listen to me," I said softly. "Right now your only job is having this baby safely. Nothing else." Emily nodded weakly. Then another contraction hit. Hours blurred after that. Rain hammered the windows while nurses rotated through shifts. Daniel drifted in and out of the room looking overwhelmed and useless in equal measure. Every time Patricia entered, Emily visibly tensed. That told me more than any argument could. Around noon, while Emily slept briefly between contractions, a nurse quietly approached me near the doorway. "Mrs. Harper." "Yes." She lowered her voice. "I need Emily awake before any authorization forms are signed." Ice spread through my stomach. "What forms?" The nurse hesitated carefully. "Someone downstairs has been repeatedly asking questions about newborn discharge procedures and temporary medical permissions." "Patricia." "Of course." The nurse continued gently. "We just want to make sure the patient isn't being pressured while medicated." I stared at her. "How often does that happen?" The nurse gave me the saddest little smile. "More than you'd think." That sentence stayed with me. More than you'd think. Not monsters. Not scandals. Just ordinary control happening quietly inside ordinary families. By late afternoon, Emily was exhausted beyond speech. Daniel finally sat beside her bed and held her hand properly for the first time all day. She looked at him carefully. "Please don't let her take over everything," she whispered. Daniel's face broke a little after that. Not dramatically. Just a man finally realizing weakness has consequences. "I'm sorry," he whispered back. And for once I believed he meant it. At 6:12 that evening, my granddaughter was born. 7 pounds 1 ounce. Dark hair, loud lungs. Perfect. The entire room changed the second she cried. Even Patricia softened for a moment when the nurse carried the baby across the room. That's the strange thing about new life. Sometimes it interrupts ugliness long enough for people to remember who they were before fear took over. Emily held the baby against her chest, silently, tears sliding into her hairline. Then she looked at me. "Not Patricia. Me." "Can you stay tonight?" she whispered. Before I could answer, another nurse entered holding a clipboard. "Emily," she said gently, "I also need you to confirm these revised authorization requests." Patricia froze near the window. Daniel looked confused. Emily took the clipboard slowly. Then with trembling hands she crossed out 3 names. One of them was Patricia's. The room went completely silent. Nobody spoke for a full 10 seconds after Emily crossed out Patricia's name. You could hear the soft hiss of hospital oxygen somewhere down the hall. The baby shifted against Emily's chest, making tiny squeaking noises newborns make before they fully wake up. Outside the windows, rain still streaked the glass in silver lines. Patricia stood perfectly still near the corner chair. Not angry. Not yet. Just stunned. Like someone had quietly changed the rules of a game she thought she controlled. The nurse took the clipboard carefully. "Thank you, Emily," she said gently. Professional voice. Neutral voice. But even she understood something important had just happened in that room. Daniel looked back and forth between his wife and his mother like a man suddenly realizing he'd spent years standing in the middle of something dangerous without naming it properly. Emily looked exhausted beyond words. But for the first time in months, she didn't look small. That mattered. Patricia recovered first. She always did. "Well," she said lightly, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her coat sleeve, "I think everyone's emotional right now." There it was again. The translation trick. Turn pain into overreaction. Turn control into concern. Turn humiliation into misunderstanding. Normally, Daniel would have helped smooth things over. But this time he stayed quiet. And for the first time in our entire relationship, his silence no longer protected his mother. It exposed her. Patricia noticed immediately. Her eyes shifted toward him. Daniel. He rubbed both hands across his face slowly. I didn't know you contacted the hospital that many times. Patricia gave a short laugh. I was trying to help. Emily let out the faintest sound beside me. Not crying. Just exhaustion. I never asked you to. Patricia turned toward her instantly. You're overwhelmed, sweetheart. You're exhausted. That's completely normal after childbirth. I'm not confused, Emily whispered. The room changed after that sentence. Because weak people can ignore anger. But calm truth. That's harder. Patricia's smile tightened slightly. Nobody said you were confused. Emily looked down at her sleeping baby. You kept asking Daniel what would happen if I couldn't handle motherhood. Patricia opened her mouth immediately. That is not what You brought guardianship forms into my house twice. Daniel looked sharply at his mother. What? Patricia's composure slipped just slightly. They were temporary emergency papers. You told me they were hospital recommendations, Emily said quietly. Patricia's eyes flashed toward Daniel. And there it was. The first real crack. Because manipulative people survive through private conversations, separate conversations, controlled versions of reality. Truth becomes dangerous when everybody finally sits in the same room together. Daniel stood slowly. Mom, did you tell Emily the hospital suggested guardianship paperwork? Patricia crossed her arms. I was trying to prepare for possibilities. No, Emily whispered. You were preparing for me to fail. Nobody moved. The baby stirred softly again. Outside in the hallway, a cart rolled past with rattling metal trays. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary hospital life. Meanwhile, our family was quietly splitting open in room 214. Patricia's voice sharpened for the first time. You have no idea how hard motherhood really is yet. Emily looked up then. And Lord help me, I saw myself in her face suddenly. Not physically. Emotionally. That same exhausted dignity women carry after years of swallowing things politely. I know enough to know I don't want my daughter growing up afraid of disappointing everybody. Patricia blinked. That one landed. Daniel sank slowly into the chair beside the bed. You went behind our backs, he asked his mother quietly. Patricia looked genuinely offended now. Daniel, I was protecting this family. No, I said softly from the corner. You were trying to control it. Patricia turned toward me immediately. And you've been waiting years to say that. I could have fought her then. Could have unloaded every insult, every humiliation, every casserole dish criticism, every wedding slight, every little comment about money and class and good families. But suddenly I felt tired. Older. Not weak. Just aware that revenge rarely heals people the way fantasies promise. So instead I said the truest thing I had. I think you're scared. The room went still again. Patricia actually laughed once under her breath. Scared of what? Being unnecessary. Her face changed immediately. Tiny shift. But enough. Daniel noticed too. So did Emily. Because underneath all Patricia's control lived something older and sadder. Fear. Fear of aging. Fear of loneliness. Fear of losing purpose after widowhood hollowed out her life. Frank used to say some people confuse control with love because they're terrified nobody will stay otherwise. Looking at Patricia now, I finally understood it. Her husband died 8 years earlier. Since then, Daniel became her entire emotional center. Then Emily arrived, then the baby. Patricia wasn't trying to steal a child because she was evil. She was trying to secure her place before time pushed her aside. That didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained it. And explanation changes the shape of anger. Daniel leaned forward slowly, elbows on his knees. Mom, he said carefully, did you honestly think Emily would lose this baby? Patricia's eyes filled instantly. First time I'd ever seen that woman lose control of herself emotionally. I thought she'd need help, she whispered. Emily answered before anyone else could. I needed support, she said softly, not replacement. That line stayed with me. Support, not replacement. Simple. True. Patricia sat down slowly after that. Older somehow. The room felt different now, smaller, more honest. No dramatic screaming, no television-style explosion. Just people finally cornered by reality. Daniel looked at Emily with tears standing in his eyes. I should have stopped this sooner. Emily nodded once. Yes, she said quietly, you should have. There was no cruelty in her voice, which somehow made it hurt more. A nurse entered briefly to check the baby's vitals. Everyone went silent while she worked. When she left again, Patricia stood carefully and picked up her purse. I think I should go home, she said. Nobody stopped her. But before leaving, she walked slowly to Emily's bedside. Then very awkwardly, she touched the baby's blanket. Not the baby herself. Just the blanket. Like she suddenly understood trust had to be earned again from the beginning. And honestly, that was the first sincere thing I'd ever seen her do. 3 weeks after the baby was born, Emily stopped answering Patricia's daily phone calls. Not cruelly. Not dramatically. She just stopped picking up every single time the phone rang. And for our family, that counted as a revolution. The baby little Caroline Grace Beaumont developed a habit of sleeping all day and screaming from midnight until 4 in the morning. Emily looked permanently exhausted. Daniel looked like a man slowly realizing love required more than good intentions and mortgage payments. I started coming over every Tuesday and Thursday to help. Not because Emily asked. Because mothers notice things. The laundry piling up, the untouched dishes, the dark circles under someone's eyes. The way silence feels different inside a house where 2 people are trying not to argue in front of a newborn. One Thursday morning, I found Emily standing in the kitchen crying quietly while warming a bottle. Not sobbing. Just tears slipping down her face while the microwave hummed. What happened? I asked softly. She shook her head immediately. Nothing. New mothers lie about exhaustion almost as much as widows lie about loneliness. I took the bottle from her gently. Go shower, I said. You smell like baby formula and fear. That made her laugh a little through the tears. Progress. While she showered upstairs, I sat in the living room rocking Caroline beside the window. Rain tapped softly against the glass again. North Carolina had been raining for weeks. The television played muted daytime news nobody was actually watching. Tiny baby socks hung drying over the back of a dining room chair. Ordinary life. That's the thing younger people don't always understand. Families rarely heal during dramatic speeches. They heal while somebody folds towels, warms bottles, brings soup, shows up again after the fight. Daniel came downstairs wearing wrinkled work clothes and carrying his laptop bag. He looked startled seeing me there. You're home early, I said. Left the office, he answered quietly. That alone told me things were changing. Old Daniel would have stayed at work 12 hours pretending overtime solved emotional problems. He hovered awkwardly near the kitchen for a moment before finally saying, I started therapy. I looked up. Honestly, I respected him more for saying it plainly than I had for almost anything else in the past 3 years. How's that going? He gave a weak smile. My therapist says conflict avoidance is still conflict, just quieter. Frank could have told him that for free. But I only nodded. Daniel sat across from me slowly. I didn't realize how much pressure Emily was under. I rocked Caroline gently. You realized, I said softly, you just hoped it would fix itself. That landed. Because it was true. Daniel stared down at his wedding ring. My whole life with Mom was about keeping things calm. I believed him. Boys raised by controlling mothers often become men who mistake silence for peace. She wasn't always like this, he added quietly. There it was. The grief underneath Patricia. Her husband died suddenly from a heart attack while golfing in Florida. Daniel told me once she found herself completely alone afterward for the first time since she was 19 years old. Some people respond to loneliness by withdrawing. Others respond by tightening their grip on everybody left. Patricia tightened. Hard. A few days later, she finally came to my house. I almost didn't answer the door when I saw her car. Not because I hated her. Because I was tired. There's a difference. She stood on my porch holding a foil-covered casserole dish like every Southern woman before her who didn't know how to apologize without food involved. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, I made chicken tetrazzini. I stepped aside and let her in. That's adulthood sometimes. Not forgiveness. Just leaving enough room for somebody to enter. She sat stiffly at my kitchen table while I made coffee. The same kitchen where Emily cried after the baby shower. The same kitchen where Frank once balanced our checkbook every Sunday night. Life keeps happening in the same rooms no matter how much changes inside them. Patricia folded and unfolded her napkin repeatedly. Finally, she said, "I crossed lines. I waited. I thought I was helping." "You were scared," I answered softly. She looked at me sharply. Then her face fell. Because she knew I was right. For several long seconds, only the coffee maker made noise. Then Patricia whispered something I never expected to hear from her. "When my husband died, I disappeared." I said nothing. She continued staring at the table. "People checked on me for maybe 6 months, then everybody moved on. Daniel became the only person who still needed me. There it was. The real thing underneath all the control. Not evil. Fear of becoming irrelevant. Older women understand that fear in ways younger people can't yet. You spend decades needed by everybody, children, husbands, schools, churches, jobs, neighbors. Then one day the phone rings less. People stop asking your opinion. You become background noise in your own family if you aren't careful." Patricia wiped beneath one eye quickly. "I didn't realize I was trying to turn Emily into another version of myself." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Because somewhere deep down, I knew she finally understood the damage. "I'm still angry with you," I admitted quietly. "You should be. But Emily needs peace more than she needs sides." Patricia nodded slowly. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked her actual age. Not polished, not intimidating. Just tired. Aging humbles everyone eventually. The only question is whether humility arrives before loneliness does. Before she left, Patricia paused near the front door. "Do you think Emily will forgive me?" I thought carefully before answering. "Yes," I said, "but probably not all at once." She nodded like someone accepting a medical diagnosis. Then she quietly walked out into the cold November afternoon. And for the first time since the baby shower, I no longer saw her as a villain standing across from my family. I saw another older woman trying very badly not to become invisible. By the time Caroline was baptized in February, the worst of winter had finally loosened its grip on North Carolina. The trees outside the church still looked bare, but tiny hints of green had started pushing through the branches. Frank always used to say February was an honest month. Nothing beautiful yet, but proof that survival worked quietly underground. I thought about that while standing in front of my bathroom mirror, pinning on my earrings that Sunday morning. 3 months earlier, our family nearly split apart over fear, silence, and control. Now we were getting dressed for church together again. Not perfectly healed, just willing to keep trying. At 64, I've learned that's what reconciliation usually looks like in real life. Not dramatic speeches. Not movie endings. Just people choosing over and over to behave a little differently than they did before. The baptism was held at the same small Methodist church where the baby shower happened. That mattered. Same fellowship hall, same stained glass windows, same coffee brewing somewhere in the background. But the room felt different now. Quieter, softer. More careful with people's hearts. Emily arrived carrying Caroline in a cream-colored blanket her grandmother Frank's mother had crocheted years ago before arthritis took her hands. Daniel walked beside her holding the diaper bag awkwardly, like a man still learning fatherhood one mistake at a time. And Patricia came in alone. No dramatic entrance, no church friends orbiting around her, no performance. Just a 70-year-old widow carrying a small gift bag and looking strangely nervous. That told me more than an apology ever could. During the service, Pastor Reynolds spoke about family in that calm Southern preacher voice older folks could probably recognize blindfolded. Children remember less about perfection, he said, and more about how people made them feel safe. That line settled heavily over all of us. I glanced toward Emily. She was already crying quietly. Not embarrassed tears, healing tears. After the baptism, everyone gathered downstairs for sandwiches, sheet cake, and the kind of polite church conversation Americans over 60 could perform in their sleep. Football, blood pressure medication, gas prices, grandbabies. Normal life again. And honestly, normal life can feel miraculous after emotional chaos. I stood near the coffee station stirring powdered creamer into a paper cup when Daniel approached me. "Linda." I turned. He looked nervous. "Good." Some conversations should make people nervous. Can we talk for a minute? We stepped into the hallway outside the fellowship hall where old mission trip photos lined the walls in faded wooden frames. For a second, Daniel just stared at the floor. Then he said quietly, "I failed her." Not defensive, not polished. Just true. I leaned against the wall carefully. "You failed yourself too," I answered. He nodded slowly. "My therapist keeps asking why I thought keeping quiet was protecting people." "That's how children survive controlling parents," I said softly. "But grown men can't stay children forever." Daniel looked exhausted after that. But lighter too. Like honesty finally weighed less than avoidance. "I should have defended Emily at the shower," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "No softening. No rescuing. People grow better when truth arrives clean." He swallowed hard. "I keep replaying her face in my head." I understood that. Some moments stay permanently alive inside marriages. He looked toward the fellowship hall doors where Emily's laughter drifted faintly into the hallway. She almost stopped trusting me completely. But she didn't. That's the part I don't deserve. I studied him carefully then. For the first time since Emily married him, I saw something different in Daniel. Not confidence. Responsibility. And responsibility changes people more permanently than guilt ever will. Back inside the fellowship hall, Patricia sat alone near the windows, holding Caroline carefully against her shoulder. Not possessively. Not performatively. Just gently. The baby had one tiny fist wrapped around Patricia's pearl necklace. Patricia looked older now. Not weaker exactly. Just less defended. Emily walked over slowly and sat beside her. The two women spoke quietly for several minutes. I couldn't hear the conversation. That was probably for the best. Not every healing moment belongs to witnesses. Eventually, Emily looked across the room toward me. Then she smiled. A real smile this time. The kind I hadn't seen consistently since before her father died. And suddenly I realized something painful and beautiful all at once. The deepest wound from the baby shower was never Patricia's speech. It was silence. The silence beside Emily when she was humiliated. The silence inside Daniel when he avoided conflict. The silence inside Patricia after widowhood hollowed her out. Even my own silence over the years when I kept excusing behavior to avoid tension. Families rarely break from one cruel sentence. They break from all the truths nobody says out loud. Later that afternoon, after most guests left, Emily helped me carry leftover cake containers toward the parking lot. Cold wind moved through the church trees softly. "Mom," she said quietly. "Yeah." The worst part wasn't what she said at the shower. I looked at her. It was watching everybody wait to see if anyone would defend me. That one hurt. Because it was true. People remember humiliation. But they remember silence even longer. Emily slipped her arm through mine as we walked toward our cars. And for the first time in a very long while, she felt like my little girl again. Not because she needed rescuing. Because she finally trusted herself. As for Patricia, healing came slower. But months later, she started volunteering at the church grief group for widows. Daniel kept going to therapy. Emily returned to nursing part-time after maternity leave ended. And every Sunday afternoon, our strange, patched-together family gathered for dinner at somebody's house. Usually mine. There were still awkward moments, still scars, still things nobody fully forgot. But there was honesty now. And honesty, even painful honesty, leaves more room for love than control ever does. If this story touched you, I hope you'll take a moment to reflect on the quiet moments inside your own family, the times someone needed support, protection, or simply one person willing to speak up. And if you've ever felt unseen, dismissed, or silently hurt by the people closest to you, I hope this story reminds you that dignity matters, your voice matters, and it's never too late for families to change. Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this.